Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, November 6, 2018. We'll start off with roll call, please.
Councilmember Dorman,
Here.
Councilmember Durham,
Here.
Councilmember Moeller,
Here.
Vice Mayor Durham-Becker,
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I think that pledge takes on a little extra importance today, being election day across the country. So we look forward to the outcome of all of the elections, including our own. Feel better about our own than I do across the country. Is there a motion to adopt tonight's agenda as presented?
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Were we going to try to do vocast on that?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
We're going to practice our electronic voting. So we're going to slow with
Yeah, slow.
Councilmember Dorman with the motion, and I believe Councilmember Durham with the second.
Hit this right here. There you go.
Okay. We still need, I don't see any buttons on here.
You don't have that.
Refresh it. I just did. It worked. There you go.
Okay.
Looks a little different with
There we
the
go.
stuff. There we go.
And now it's not exiting the screen.
Now that window's not going away.
No,
Uh-oh.
go to the next one. When he
Yep.
tells
Yeah, so now we're frozen with the voting window.
you. We are?
Yes.
All of us look like this.
Okay, so. Did it all go away?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we're
That's a
going
new feature, not a glitch, new feature. Okay,
to, okay, call it what you want.
okay. Just hopeful.
Next up, public comment. I know we have at least one, if not more, members of the, well, we have a couple things to talk about in public comment. Joshua, I invite you to come up and share what you have to say with us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I just wanted, my name is Joshua Keyser. I'm Public Information Officer at the Veterans Home of California, Yountville. Just wanted to announce to everyone that we're having our Veterans Day ceremony this year. We're holding it on Monday, November 12th. And we're going to have it at our Mistis Chapel. And for those of you who don't know, our Mistis Chapel is a very historic monument. It's actually the only historic monument on the grounds registered historic monument. It was built in 1918, and so therefore it is 100 years old, matching the anniversary of our Mistis Day. So we thought it very fitting to be at that location. The ceremony will be at 10 o'clock, about 10 to 11. And then we also will have the chapel open from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. that day for public viewing. So we'd love everyone to attend the ceremony that can come. And I have some flyers here. I can just leave them somewhere and go from there.
Thank you. I think we can leave them with Michelle, and she'll leave them out
Thank you
in
so
our
much.
lobby. Thanks, Joshua. And I know, I believe our town clerk had a introduction to make.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce to the council and the public John Dobbs, our new part-time records coordinator and
At the
Yountville
back.
residents.
He's behind
saying
everybody.
hi in the back and doing a great job getting to know everything, and great to have him on board.
Welcome, John. Are there any other members of the public here to speak on public comment? Or members of our staff?
Good evening. So as you may have recalled, about a year ago, we started a very public process to choose a sculpture that would finalize the project of our renovation at Veterans Memorial Park. And I'm very excited to introduce the artist who's here with us tonight. He got in on Monday. Our installation is taking place this week, and we will have our dedication and unveiling on Sunday, November 11th at 3 o'clock, so hopefully everyone can join us. We had a couple of our council members that represented on that subcommittee that chose this artist from 22 entries that we had received. And Robert brings a really interesting perspective that some of the other artists did it in that he's not just a professional artist, he's also a veteran. So it's my pleasure to have Robert Eccleston come up and say hello to you and have the pleasure of meeting you all before the event on Sunday.
Yes, welcome.
I'm Rob. I'm very honored to have been entrusted with this project. As Samantha said, I'm a 6-year Army veteran, and so designing veterans memorials is more than just a job, it's more of a calling. And I really feel that this is probably the most beautiful place that I've ever placed a sculpture. I am absolutely, and my wife is absolutely blown away by the beauty of the town and how friendly everybody has been towards us so far. And we really look forward to dedicating this memorial on Sunday. And once again, thank you for entrusting me.
Thank you, and welcome to Yountville, both of you, and we're looking forward to Sunday.
Yes, and now we're going to go eat some of your really good food and drink some of your really good wine.
Well, a good deal. The rest of you have to stay. All right. See you on Sunday.
I'm going to go with them.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. Joshua's picking up the tab. Any other public comment tonight? Seeing no one else coming forward, we'll move on to our consent calendar. We have items A through G. Are there any questions or is there action on the consent calendar?
I move adoption of the consent calendar.
Okay, we have that motion
A second.
and we have that second, and I see some mouse movement and clicking. Please cast your ballot.
You have to
Refresh.
refresh again. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I'm calling it a glitch, Michelle.
It's not, but it is different. It's
It
a different,
did-
fo-
it
it's a
did go-
different format for
Okay, and it
us.
did go away on its own
It
this
did
time.
this time?
It did.
Everyone's clear? All right,
Yes.
wonderful, that's great.
So I believe that passes unanimously. Yes, it does. The consent calendar passes unanimously. Presentations is our next item. We have none for tonight. We'll move right on to our first public hearing, item 8A, RH Gallery and Masonry Design Review and Sign Permit. Yes.
Good evening. So tonight you have before you design modifications to the RH campus, and that includes the gallery and restaurant on the north end of the project site and the Maisonry tasting room on the south end of the project site. And this has been a complicated project with a history that dates back to 2015 when it first came before the town council, and there have been some revisions since then. So I want to walk you through those for a better understanding of the timeline and the changes. And in June of 2015 is when the master development plan first came before the town council, and that was for the redevelopment of what was then a vacant site, but was formerly the home of Frankie, Johnny, and Luigi II. And the project was for 3 new structures situated around a courtyard and with other site improvements. And the focus of that meeting and those design layouts were the general layout, really the architecture of those 3 buildings, and the parking and the circulation. And there's a lot of discussion in the staff report on the design ordinance standards of height and setback and FAR, and but there were also included on the drawings some more conceptual design items, and they relate to the design items before you tonight. One is the 18-foot tall fireplace, and it was shown on the RH project site, and on the Masonry site they were showing a fire pit. The frontage improvements were shown across both properties, and we see the olive trees used as street trees. And there's also what's described in the staff report as a short stone wall and a narrow planting strip. And so it's not uncommon at the design review stage to have some improvements that are more well-defined, such as the buildings and the architecture and the layout, and there are some other improvements that are more conceptual. And that's because not all of the site constraints are understood and engineering hasn't been completed, and so we see this quite typically with projects. So neither the fireplace nor the frontage improvements were really described in detail in the staff report, although some level of improvement was shown on the drawings. Then in September of 2017, the applicant brought design and use changes to the town council for consideration. And at that time, we see the fire pit being relocated on the Masonry property so that it aligns with that central access for pedestrians across the 2 properties. We also see that the knee walls in front of RH were added to the drawings, and landscaping is shown, and there were other changes shown to the garden at Masonry. And the items that were identified as changes by the applicant were analyzed in the staff report, but the knee walls and the planters were not explicitly analyzed, and so they weren't called out specifically in the staff report, although they were shown on the drawings. Then since 2016, we began to see building permits for the property, and we've processed 13 building permit applications and revisions for the site as a whole, and we see individual permits for a grading permit, a foundation permit for that glass roof and structural design, as well as for the buildings. And a lot of changes were made during plan check and prior to building permit issuance. And all of these changes are routed to Interwest, and changes are shown in clouded bubbles, and then are also routed to town staff. And what we found was that not all changes were really adequately identified on the drawings, but we began to notice these during inspections, and we raised our concern with the applicant. An example is the fireplace at Maison Rue, and when we saw the frame behind the structure as to what was to be installed, we put a stop work order on the project because it exceeded the height limit of the design ordinance. But since the frame had been fabricated, the applicants asked permission to complete it at their risk, and they acknowledged that if they didn't receive approval, that it would be lowered. So the fireplace is an example of some of the changes we saw along the way, and it is one of the improvements that is completed, so you're looking at it through that lens rather than a proposed and not completed design element. And I think it's important also to note that the conditions of approval on the original master development plan include a standard condition that development and operation of the use shall be substantially as represented on the approved plans and elevations, the material samples, and the project narrative. And that condition is there to allow really some minor design changes as site characteristics and other items are better understood through the process. And minor and design finish changes may be approved at staff level, but larger changes are to come before the decision makers, including the council. So before you tonight are several design changes. Let me get this going. Oh no. Oh shoot. That isn't right. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. Oh, darn, I thought I had it open. Sorry, this I wanted to show you another photo, but we're not going to get it tonight. This is fine, sorry. Okay, so tonight I'm here to share with you the 5 proposed changes that are for your consideration. And here you see a rendering of the project site. I think it's more useful to look at the site plan. And here the top of the drawing is Washington Street, and RH is on the left with Maison Rue on the right. So the first proposed change is the 18-tall outdoor fireplace at Maison Rue. It's shown on the right-hand side of this screen. Its purpose is to align with the 18-foot tall fireplace at RH on that central pedestrian access and to create the symmetry for the site. The applicant is also seeking approval of planters with boxwood atop the existing knee walls. And we see a change in grade from the left side of this drawing to the right side. It's about 5 feet. So the knee walls themselves are between 16 inches and 36 inches on the RH side, 22 inches on Maison Rue. And when you add the planters and the boxwood, we see the height increased to at least 3.5 feet and up to about 5 feet, maybe 5+ feet, because we're talking plans. The third proposed improvement are a pair of drapes that you will find on Maison Rue hanging from each of the 8 trellis structures. And these are fixed 34-inch wide panels that are intended as decorative elements to soften the metal edges of the trellises, and they're not intended to be closed to create private enclosures for guests to sip wine, and the fixed nature of them is in support of that proposal. The fourth improvement is for an open metal fence and gate at Maison Rue, and that's shown in red on the right-hand side of this drawing, it would be set back about 10 feet from the front property line to align with that southeast building corner at Maisonnerie. And it is an open metal fencing that would remain open during the day to be closed at night for security. And I think it's important to note that the applicant had originally proposed a 7-foot tall wall and gate in this location. That was taken to the ZDRB for their feedback. The ZDRB felt that that condition wasn't consistent with the Yountville aesthetic. It wasn't consistent with the code that limits it to 3 feet. And so the applicant revised its proposal to the 3 foot that is in your packet tonight. The last improvement is for signage at Maisonnerie, and the applicant is proposing 1 at the building entry and 2 at the new entry to the garden, 1 on each side of those seat walls. And there is specific mention in the 2015 staff report, that original approval before you, that signage at Maisonnerie would come back before the decision makers. So when we're looking at these improvements, we're looking to the zoning ordinance and the design ordinance for the zoning district and the specific standards that apply. And I think, why don't we start with the more simple of the proposed improvements, where there is a more direct connection and conformance with the code. So first we'll look to the zoning and design ordinance for the Old Town Commercial District, and that district, it is to promote an interesting and attractive environment for pedestrians, and it is to increase the interface between commercial uses and the street. And so pedestrian orientation really is key. And when we look at this design for the drapes, we see that the applicants have installed a new direct pedestrian connection from the sidewalk to the garden that did not previously exist, which is in support of those goals, that they have created separate and individual gathering spaces under each of these trellises, that the drapes are used to soften the lines of the metal, but that they cannot be closed for privacy. When we look at the signs, we're looking at the sign ordinance as to size, design, materials, and location, and the 3 signs that are proposed are similar in all those attributes to the 4 approved signs at RH, and those signs are found to either side of the building entrance at the street, and on either side of the pilasters that offer access to the driveway and the rear parking lot. And what we see is that these signs are less than 1 square foot each, and they're much less than would be allowed based on the linear building footage, which is 1/2 square foot of signage for each lineal foot of signage. And these signs too are scaled for the pedestrian, both in size and location, and they are in conformance with the code. The last item on the easier list is the 3 foot tall fence and gate, and at 3 feet it complies with the design ordinance requirements for walls, fences, and landscape screens. And they will be constructed of an open mesh material that will allow views through the gate when it's open or closed, and it matches the fencing that you see elsewhere on the property in 3 separate locations, both at the back end or the side entries on that central access to both Maisonnerie and RH, and at the rear of RH from the parking lot onto the project site. So now let's discuss the outdoor fireplace and the planters and boxwood atop the hedges. And these are a little more difficult because there are specific design standards that speak to a maximum height, and both of these seek to exceed those height limits. The code limits an outdoor fireplace to 10 feet, and we see 18 feet proposed here, and the code limits the height of a wall, fence, or landscape screen to 3 feet in the front setback, where the applicant proposes about 3.5 feet to 5 feet here. And what's unique is that the master development plan process under which this project was originally proposed, and which amendments are also analyzed, allows an express provision that allows for an exception as to height for structures, including the fireplace, and for walls and fences. But that exception is a vehicle to approve these, but only where the council can find that that exception is necessary to further the goals and purposes of the zoning ordinance and the design ordinance. So we're going to look at those a little further. So this For this analysis, we looked to the Old Town Commercial Zoning District. I've already mentioned the preference for pedestrian orientation, but this district is also to reflect Yountville's commercial beginnings from the period of 1870 to 1920. And by doing so, it creates a commercial district that is separate and apart from the other commercial zoning districts. So for the fireplace, the applicant has stated that its goal is to create symmetry for the two fireplaces that anchor the ends of the central access. And while you may not be able to see both of the fireplaces from any one vantage point at the same time, you do get a sense of the height of the fireplaces and how they relate to one another as you move across the property. And the RH property that you see on the left-hand side of this drawing at 18 feet was shown and approved at the original public hearing for the project in 2015, and it offers a design element that is therefore consistent with the Old Town Commercial District. And furthermore, we have a letter of support from the two Burgundy Commons homeowners, one of which is the adjacent property owner who does not object to this project. So those are facts that you can consider when you're looking at whether the fireplace supports the goals and policies of the zoning and design ordinance for the Old Town Commercial District. The other improvement to consider are the planters with the boxwood. And the knee wall planters and boxwood improvements represent one of the more changed elements of the project over time, and one that started conceptually. In 2015, we see the conceptual landscaping with a reference to a stone wall and a narrow planter strip, and we see it in the drawings and in the renderings, but it's not shown on a scale drawing, and it's not really specifically addressed at that time. In 2017, we see a concrete planter that is shown in plan view on the drawings and is clearly identified as a concrete planter. But the elevation itself was a rendering, so it was very conceptual, and it wasn't scaled for overall height. So again, we're getting a sense of the improvement, but not all of the details. Then we saw multiple changes during the building permit stage, and like I said, there were 13 permits and revisions. And we see it change from a step-back version of a wall that builds into the site to the elimination of the front wall because of constraints in space and the olive trees, to raising the height of the rear wall and the introduction of the planters, all of which changed over time. And so this is the first time that the town council has seen this proposed improvement at this level of detail. So I think it's important to look at the definition of landscape screen, because that's how we're defining these walls and the planters and the boxwood because of their location and what they're intended to achieve. And that definition of landscape screen is a boundary or barrier of plant material formed by a row or series of shrubs, bushes, or trees that are planted with the intent of forming a relatively dense hedge for the purpose of privacy, protection, division, delineation, or for aesthetics, or that prevent passage from between any combination of any individual shrubs, bushes, or trees. And so the knee walls, the planters, and the boxwood all meet some of these conditions that are called out, and they are to serve some of these purposes. But I'd also like to have an opportunity to distinguish this improvement from the other most recent example of a landscape screen in town, and that was recently installed over the last year at Ad Hoc. And what we saw there was a 6 to 8 foot dense Carolina laurel hedge planted in the front setback. And that hedge was continuous from one side of the property to the other without breaks. And here you do see some breaks in that hedge that allow views into the property and what could be considered drawing one into the property. At RH, there's the break for the central entry. At Maisonnerie, it's into the building. And then we see the other breaks for the two entries to the garden areas that surround Maisonnerie. At Ad Hoc, the wall, before it was lowered to 3 feet, really closed off the building from the street, and it failed to maintain a pedestrian connection. Here, there are still open views into the site consistent with the Old Town Commercial Zoning District. Let me run you through some photos here. This would be the streetscape as a whole. Let's go to RH. So here at RH, there is a double set of large accordion doors on either side of the entry, and they offer views into the building, both when the windows and doors are open and when they're closed. And these windows represent a substantial portion of the facade that is transparent rather than an opaque wall that would block a view. And there's the inclusion of pedestrian-oriented amenities, such as that open-air patio on both front porches that are visible from the sidewalk. And even the trellises on the front serve to lower the perceived building height and bring it down to a pedestrian level, and that acts as a draw for pedestrians into the building. So all of these measures are effective in giving the property a strong pedestrian orientation and transparency. You know, another difference from the ad hoc property is this change in grade that I've mentioned. And from the north end of the project site shown here to the south end of the project site at Maisonnerie, we see a change in grade of about 5 feet, which means there are sections of the wall or planter that are closer to 3 feet in some areas but are closer to 5 feet in others, and it's not a uniform condition. I think it's also important to consider the alternative if the planters and boxwood, which exceed that 3-foot height limit, are removed. We're looking at a series of concrete knee walls that do not, at least in their current condition, offer any landscape screening or softness, which is one thing that we've really learned is important as part of the general plan update, and that's already incorporated into the zoning and design ordinance. So it's unfortunate I have the wrong copy of the PowerPoint here. I wanted to share with you a photo of Frankie and Johnny and Luigi too, just to refresh memories before that project was torn down. And it had a solid facade to back of sidewalk with a tall 6-foot fence and tall landscaping. And that was a condition that existed that was obviously non-conforming to the code, and when new buildings are built there is a requirement to conform, but this is an opportunity where an exception offers that opportunity, but only where it serves to further the goals and programs of the zoning and design ordinance, and that really is the big question before you tonight. So let me just run through the rest of these photos so you have a chance to see them. This is the fireplace at Maisonnerie that we're looking at, and it's on the other side, and the bluestone path here connects with RH. This is the proposed open wire metal fence and gate at the front of the Maisonnerie property. It's shown closed on the left and open on the right, and those are the improvements that are up for your consideration tonight.
Thank you. Before I open the public hearing, are there questions of the staff report? Councilmember Moeller.
I have some questions. The fireplaces, are both of them gas only? They cannot burn wood, correct? So,
They're gas.
okay,
gas
so
fireplace.
that just gets vented. You don't need a big chimney height. With the pictures that you're showing here, there are some bushes. So these are just the schematics of what the boxwoods would look like in the planters?
No, this is the south side, and these are in conformance with the 3-foot height
Okay, those
limit.
in the south side.
It's the knee
Okay.
walls that are in front of the building itself, so slightly to the right of this photo, just at the front of building. And then also in front of the entire frontage at RH.
Okay, and then I wanted to go back with some questions again when the fireplace behind Maisonnerie, when you were doing, I guess, a midterm site inspection, you saw that it was under construction. Was there any approval for any fireplace at that time? And then how about if there was, what height was approved?
Well, we separated out into 2 separate approvals. One is the entitlement approval or planning approval, and it was shown then as a fire pit, not as a fireplace. There's an opportunity to approve a fireplace provided it complies with the height limits of the code. The building permit, however, showed it at 18 feet, which does not conform, and so it wasn't an approved
So that's the
condition.
Maisonnerie we're talking about. And you believe that there was explicit approval for the 18-foot on the RH site?
It was shown in that set of improvements that came before the council.
And the
I
height?
wasn't here for that, so I don't know the specific discussion. It doesn't look like it was specifically noted. It's not included in the minutes. It's not really detailed in the drawings, but it is clearly part of the drawings and the renderings, and it shows at that 18-foot height level
Okay, so,
at the courtyard.
and then some more questions about the gate. You said that, and if you could go back and maybe, I don't know if you have a little pointer. I'm interested, you said that fence that's being recommended now from the ZDRB at 3 feet, probably the very first one with the top site. I'm trying to understand the security. It seems like it's set back, and you said it does
That was a site
provide,
plan.
yeah, that it does provide security. So you can see people could walk in from Washington, pretty far, about halfway down. If they do that, can they access? Let's say everything's closed. Is there any access to where the olive trees are? An open
From-
access that would still allow?
At the driveway between the two buildings?
Yes.
No. So both of those red circles that you see indicate 7-foot tall fences and gates that are open during the day but are closed at night. Both sites are secured, with the exception of the front area that is before you for consideration tonight.
So that
And the rear, on the very left bottom rear, you can see the third gate there, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so that middle gate does provide security from somebody going into those pavilions, pods, whatever you call them. Okay, and that,
I'm not sure that you're talking about the same gates and access here. I think
Okay,
you're
I'm-
talking about the proposed 3-foot
right,
fence and gates entering the south part of the Masonry side yard, I'll call it. Is that correct?
no, I'm talking about the one right in the middle. Isn't that the one where we have the gate, the pictures, the gate open, the gate closed? I'm assuming that's that middle one right
No,
there.
that's the one with the gates open and closed in our attachments are the south side of, they're south of the Masonry building itself.
Right. So-
On Washington, okay.
Yeah, so the one before you is this is one of the interior ones.
And what's the
open,
height of that?
7 feet.
Okay. Then there's
So
no,
it's 7
there was no
foot
issue.
Here at Maisonry facing the fireplace.
Okay.
It's
That's a
7 feet.
north-south elevation. The 3-foot fence is an
Yeah,
east-west
I was getting to that. So
elevation.
this is the, in the driveway, Margie, that you were asking about. There's one on each side, and then this is the front. And this is the only one that isn't installed. The 3 circles that were shown on the site plan show the 7-foot tall fences that secure the rest of the site.
Okay,
This is
so,
the one access point that's open.
all right, so the 3-foot one that's south of Masonry, I've got that now. Can you go back to the top one and show me how that relates to security?
These close.
Right, those close.
And that condition existed just as fence changed, I believe. There was a fence there before.
Yeah, so at Maisonry, they replaced it with fencing that would match exactly what they installed at RH, but it was very similar to this. They were repeating that aesthetic.
But in terms of security for the fence that's south, that's 3 feet of Masonry,
So the 3-foot fence offers more, if someone is committed to jumping that fence, they could get in, they could do some mischief. It doesn't block them the same way that the 7-foot tall fence does.
but they would
But I
only
think
have
the-
access to Masonry if they jumped the fence.
The outside,
Just
Yard
the
of
outside
Masonry.
portion of Maisonry.
So they could not get over to RH.
No.
Okay.
or if they got even more adventurous and wanted to hop over the 7-foot fence.
Yeah,
Well,
they
yeah,
could get
but
in
if-
there.
As long as there's a 7-foot fence between them and the open pavilions. Okay. So that's where, okay, now, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councilmember Dorman.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Liston. So the trellises, the first drawing I saw in the file had no trellises. Then we had 2, then we had 4. Are you saying now we have 8 trellises with the curtains?
6 trellises were
6.
approved. They were much
6.
larger. They split the trellises.
Well, oh, sorry, I'm talking about only the front. There were always the 2 in the back, but in the front,
Yes.
so we've gone from 2 to 4 to 6 in the front for 8 total across the property.
We, it never started with that few. So we
Okay.
had We had the 6 trellises, I would say 4 visible from the street, and they then since split those 4 into 8 and deleted the other 2 behind the building.
So we have
The
8,
sizes of the trellises changed also.
so we have 8 trellises now. They're smaller, but 8 of them. Okay.
And that was to
And-
create this walkway you see in this photo. They were
And-
basically just big structures plopped down one after the other.
And do I understand correctly that we have never seen a set of plans that show any of the walls, however they're configured, whether they're stone or plants or whatever, that are over 36 inches high?
I'm sorry, repeat that question?
Have we ever seen a set of plans that show what you're calling the knee walls, regardless of what they're built of or made of? Have we ever seen a set of plans that shows them being over 36 inches high?
No.
And could you go back to the drawing that they have submitted for our review tonight that has the red striations of that one in front of RH, please?
This one.
Yes. Is that drawing to scale?
This is a rendering, so not perfectly to
Okay,
scale.
because my take on it is they show 36 inches at the south end of the project as being the same or smaller than 25 inches of hedge and planter. So I think it's a little misleading when we look at that, but that's so that drawing is not to scale. That was my question. And do you know, even though you were not here, do you know what the necessity exception was to find in favor of the 18-foot, 10-inch fireplace at RH?
No.
Yeah, you mentioned in your staff report some parking issues. Do you want to flesh those out for us? How are they bearing on what we're deciding tonight?
Well, we're discussing design issues tonight rather than use issues, and the parking is associated with the use and operation of the site. It's something that we're trying to refine with the applicant for better use of the employee parking areas, to get a better sense of total number of employees, and to work with them to bring that into full conformance.
So that was more of a heads up for us as a context for this, rather than something that bears directly on what we're
Right,
deciding?
right. We wanted to share what some of the original operational issues were when they opened, and to share that it wasn't perfect and seamless into operating consistent with the conditions of approval,
And
which really isn't all that uncommon for projects. They all have adjustment periods a little bit.
so the fence proposed for Maisonry, as you walk up, there's a wall, I think, and then a bank of bushes that's like 3 or 4 feet deep. The fence is proposed for behind that, between the trellis and that bank of bushes?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that was at roughly the same existing previous fence and large hedge or whatever it was, where there was.
Well, except they created an opening through there that wasn't.
Right, but it
there
was
before.
approximately the same
Yeah.
distance back from the street.
Yeah.
Other questions? A couple questions very quickly. Do we know at least approximately the height of the Burgundy Commons units that are immediately to the south of the?
No.
So, but do we think they're, I can't remember visually, taller or equal or lower than the 18-foot, 10-inch?
I can't speak to that.
Okay. I can't either. And is there a concern that you have with the drapes causing massing if they're closed? Because we see in the pictures they're pulled back, and if they're closed, I know there's a concern when Hurley's added
Exactly.
drapes that it was extending the massing of the building, which was something that we were trying to avoid. Is there a concern with that, or is there enough break from one trellis to another, or one drapery structure to another?
I think no, there isn't a concern, but there is a history in this town of considering outdoor improvements that aren't buildings to contribute toward FAR, where they can have a mass, and that's closing operable drapes. In this case, since they're fixed and they're held open, they don't have that same massing issue. I think we would have a very different recommendation for you if they were drapes that could be closed, and each of those 8 cabanas could be private little dining areas that you can't see into. That isn't the case here, and so I think that the drapes contribute to the design aesthetic there, and they soften the metal rather than contributing to massing.
Is there a prohibition from closing those drapes? Is that what you're saying? don't
Well,
think so.
since they're fixed at 34 inches, they can't be closed. They could untie the
That's what I'm
rope,
talking about.
but it would just hang there as a fixed panel.
Because the drapes are so short, they can't go all the way across. And we need to make sure that that's understood by the applicant. That
Yeah, so I
that
believe
can't
there's a
happen.
condition
Okay.
included. Let me
I don't need to go further into it. It sounds like you've already
be sure to reference it.
covered that. So you're saying that we need to find that the proposed modifications are necessary. And I think Councilmember Dorman already asked a question about what is necessary. Do you find any of these, I know that we're supposed to find or not, do you find these necessary elements or convenient since they built them this way? I know that's really supposed to be, I mean, I'm looking for whether you recommend that we believe that they are necessary
I
or not.
do. In both cases, I recommend you approve the improvements that exceed the height limit. In the case of the fireplace, it's set back from the street. It is set back also from the property line, and we have the support of the neighbors to have a condition that is consistent amongst both properties. So I think that contributes in a very positive way to the site. I also find that the hedges in the front are positive and beneficial, and that they are not, that they offer something more than a wall, fence, or screen that I think that code section is intended to apply, which is along a front property line that closes off entirely. I think the ad hoc example is exactly what we're trying to avoid, which is solid and continuous and tall, and not to allow entry. Here, we maintain entry at 4 points, and the design of these buildings is very open and pedestrian oriented. There are views, you are drawn into the site, so I really feel like they don't have the same negative impact that we're trying to avoid.
And to use the another comparison at red, the over 3 foot height living fence or wall, if I recall, it was allowed because there used to be an even taller solid wall. So there's a pre-existing condition that was even more restrictive. So there was an exception that we allowed because it was a living fence and it was shorter than what they were removing.
Exactly,
Does that sound
yes.
accurate?
And that exception was approved by the council, so it's an example of a case where the council said it's okay to be a little taller. It works.
The last thing about the drapes and the seating areas, I think that was also, and maybe the applicant can speak to this if they want to, a way to control the amount of seating also. I think we were talking about being very sensitive to the fact that there's more space than they are allowed to fill with seats and bodies, and these create kind of exclusive seating areas, and so there needs to be some definition about them, and that might be a finding that we say this gives us the benefit of a little more protection about how many people can be sitting in the back and side yards. They found this as the solution to our restriction on the number of seats. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Vice Mayor, question?
Yeah, Sandra, please, I have one clarification. I believe that you were reading in the ordinance that, for Old Town that it's either necessary or for the aesthetic purpose. Is that correct?
I think that was the definition of landscape screen, and it creates two categories of what is the intent of a screen that would be contrary to that 3 foot height limit. Yeah, one is for aesthetics and one is for passage.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I open the public hearing? So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite the applicant to address what you've heard and anything else. And then we'll invite other members of the public that would like to speak. Welcome.
Hello.
Is it on? In 1 second.
If you could maybe just raise that up so we can be sure to hear you. Thank you.
Good evening to council members, mayor, vice mayor. My name is Jordan Brown. You've probably seen me here before, Director of Architecture and Design for RH. Thank you for having us tonight. We're here as Director Liston noted to review a few outstanding items that we, I would preface this by saying, as everyone is quite familiar with, RH loves to iterate and improve on designs, hence 13 revisions that we've had throughout the last several years since this project was first born. What we're presenting tonight is the final iteration as we've developed before opening. So you'll see all of the multiple tweaks that we'll cover tonight are things that we've been refining over the past few years in either previous town council meetings, in permit sets, and further conversation with town staff. So here, just to start off, as everyone's now, I think, pretty well acquainted with the site, but if there are any additional site questions, I'm happy to answer them. This is just the aerial rendering that we reviewed in for town council 2 years ago when we had the glass roof and adjacent structures. And I just wanted to share a photo of the final product as it is, just to reiterate that the intent here is not to pull a fast one on anyone. It's really that we are trying to flesh out and iterate and improve on the design that we've always intended to build. So here's the finalized complex with the new complex to the north on the right and masonry's revisions to the south on the left. Here you'll see the new pedestrian access point on the south, the garden entrance that was not previously there. It was just a hedge fence, if you will, and the other various improvements that we'll go through. You'll also note that you'll see the two fireplaces and how they relate to one another in the aerial image here, noting that they're the same height and massing. The one in question tonight on the left, obviously, and then the one that was previously approved on the right. Again, here's the site plan. I think we're all pretty well familiarized with the open items tonight. I would start by saying again that the fireplace was a point that, as our company loves to embrace symmetry, it made sense to us to carry that aesthetic from one end of the campus to the other. While we have the same olive trees and the same landscaping, we have the same fireplace on one end to the other to tie the campus cohesively together as a project. The fireplace is set back from site, as previously noted, by a pretty substantial margin, by 52.5 feet from the street, from 5 and almost 6 feet from the adjacent property line, and is very largely obscured by the olive trees and the trellises in play in front of it to get to the street. So the overall massing, while it does match the size of the massing that's of the fireplace that was approved, that's hidden behind building 1. We would argue that the fireplace that's under question tonight is similarly obscured from an overall site view and massing in the same manner. So it looks very tall in elevation when you're looking at it, but when you're looking at it in perspective as you're approaching the street, it's actually not even really distinguished. There's not a laser on this, right? Is there? Oh, yeah.
I don't think
but
it works
it's not
on
the
that screen.
It's not on the
Yeah.
screen. Right. So I don't even know if you can see it, but this is the most clear shot. If you come from the south or from the north more along the sidewalk, the olive trees actually obscure the fireplace even further. So you see the metal shroud hiding the exhausts of the fireplace directly behind the steel and fabric trellises to the left. And that's really the extent of the overall fireplace massing that is present from the street. Here, I'd also like to just review the other talking points we have. The plaques that are flanking the new south entrance are 10 inches by 14 inches in size. They're actually the same size as Director Liston pointed out, that are consistent through site. And the third one that was in question is a replacement plaque for the original masonry bronze plaque that had always been there. So we replaced it with the same material and size. And that was also I don't know the exact dimensions of that sign, but they were approximately the same size as what's currently installed. The gate, actually going to the easier points, the swagged drapes that are in a fixed position is kind of one of our signature outdoor moves. It helps to soften the landscape, make people not feel quite so open in the air when you're actually sitting, and it does help to define the individual pads of the seating areas of the trellises that, as Director Liston noted, have gotten substantially smaller when we decided to open up they have increased in number, but they got increasingly smaller than the original approved trellis size. So the square footage of all the trellises actually has not changed from the original approval. The gate the feedback we got from ZDRB, we really took to heart about making sure that we were not creating a barrier to our neighbors and not discouraging our neighbors necessarily from approaching the property, but really just to discourage unwanted traffic late at night, just to at least note where the property begins and ends in the same manner that we have throughout the rest of the property, throughout the rest of the complex, I should say. With the landscaping that's in front, we feel that we are further obscuring the new fence and gate. The sizing of the members was actually also called into question during ZDRB, and we went back to challenge our engineers to see if we could make them thinner and the posts and the framing of the actual fence and gate thinner. They're as thin as they can go. I know that was a concern. They're as thin as they can go to actually operate in their sliding manner so that they're not intrusive into the actual pedestrian way, but rather when they're open during business hours, they never close. And then when we are closed at night, we just simply slide them across the pathway like we do with all the other gates. I would note that even though we close them at night when we close, we typically open all of our gates early in the morning, as I think a number of neighbors have already experienced when they're out for their morning walk, walking their dogs. When we get there in the morning, we often open up the complex to start the day, and we're certainly not discouraging our neighbors who are just out for their morning exercise to walk through the campus. It's been a pretty regular occurrence since we've opened, so we're happy to accommodate that. We're certainly not trying to discourage, like I said, our neighbors, just trying to make sure that the property is secure after hours. The plaster and knee walls have been actually a challenge for us since the beginning of this project. I would note that this has actually had the front yard of Building 1 has had several iterations, as Director Liston noted. Originally, the idea was to have a series of two concrete walls out in front. There was a lower concrete wall before you got to the front patios that had been in the drawings from Town Council for the review before. And that's, I think, in part the wall that was initially assumed was the height. The height of the current walls is set in part to accommodate the program of the seating area out in the patio. The backs of the banquettes align with throughout the entire cafe, because we love consistency and symmetry of design. So the planters, the boxwood hedge that's very tailored and neat, aligns inside to outside, as do the heights of the banquettes. So that largely dictates the height of the wall that you see. And unfortunately, we're at a disadvantage with our elevation change here. So it's the minimum height it needs to be to accommodate our program on the north end of campus. That's the right side of these drawings. And then it just happens to be what it is because of the grade change on the south end of campus. When we decided to remove the concrete wall that was in front, which I actually think is in part drawn even more notice to the taller wall behind it, it was actually in part because we didn't want to feel like we had too many barriers between pedestrians on the street and those sitting there. And and also to create a little bit more of a landscaping hedge so that there was room for greenness, not just concrete walls that were especially unnecessary to the overall design. I would note, I know ad hoc was brought up. I know Bouchon has similar planters along the street that have more, that have larger hedges throughout. Plants grow. That's what happens when, you're in a great climate that encourages healthy plants. I would say that we encourage healthy plants, but we also have a very strict regimen to making sure that the plants that are installed on day 1 look like they do on day 101 or 201 in the same manner. So the hedge that we have, the boxwood hedge that we have currently installed, we're not planning on increasing in height. It is set to what it is for consistency within the complex, within the cafe and outside of the cafe. So there's a very specific tailored language to, as I'm sure you've noticed, all the plants on campus. I have, just the different heights. I would also note that the breaking down of the material, we were concerned about the height of the wall, which in part was addressed with the difference of materiality of the wall, creating the lower plaster concrete wall and then the steel wall to break up the overall height of it, and then softening it with adding the green boxwood within that. So again, at the north end of campus, all I should say, with the exception of where the site slopes dramatically, the north side and at the entrance, the plaster wall and the steel planter are actually 29 to 33 inches in total height, so within the allowable 36. And then at masonry, it's also at 35 inches in total height. So that's also within it's just the added green on top that finishes it, that, typically is the added buffer that is what calls it into question of the massing. I realize it's also still plays into effect, but that I wanted you to know that we've actually been trying to address the overall height with that. I believe that's all I have for now. If there are any additional questions.
Questions of council? Yes, Councilmember Durham.
Are you going to be retaining the guard still with the 3 feet gate?
No, he's still around because we're trying to make some final improvements overnight. We have a very strong policy of not wanting to impact the customer experience during the day. So any quiet maintenance efforts have happened at night, and also with the gate not installed there, we've had security.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Councilor Norman.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. I want to say that I have had the best scrambled egg I've ever had in my life at RH. So that makes it really hard for me to sit up here and do my job, because I love your project. I love all the people I've met. But my job tonight is to make sure it fits in our town and within our rules. So that said, that's kind of a context for it. Let's just talk about the knee walls first. Did you ever ask permission to build a wall that did not fit our code?
For starters, we weren't aware when we submitted the building permits that it was a code violation.
So you didn't read our code that clearly says 36 inches? I mean, y'all are a big team. You're multinational. You didn't read the little Yountville code?
Fair enough. Like I said, the actual built wall is within the 36, with the exception of the area that sloped downhill. So I would argue that depending on whatever the planting material was, it could still be within the code, the allowable
So
code.
you think when I stand at the south end of your patio, and I'm trying to say hello to someone who's eating lunch in there, and I'm like Kilroy over your hedge, you think that's a 3-foot wall, the equivalent? And I don't mean to be mean about it, but you've got a 5-foot thing there, no matter what it's comprised of.
I wish we didn't have a slope, because it would make my life a lot easier too.
Well, Jessup had the same issue, and somehow they managed to resolve it with their tiered walls across the street. So
it unfortunately impacts the program.
The bottom line is you never asked about 36-inch. You just built your wall.
We submitted for permits with that, correct.
And did it have the height on it?
Yeah.
Because our staff is saying it did not.
The drawing sheet that I have up here, that was included in the permit set.
Okay, so you,
Permit set did have that level of specificity.
so it had 61 inches on it?
Yes.
Okay. And we never said anything to you. Now, you also said that you built the wall to hit the banquette seat backs. So what happens if tonight we say you have to take the wall down to a height of 3 feet? However it's configured, plants, planters, concrete.
It's going to be a real challenge for us programmatically. I'm not sure. I'll have to take that back to those higher up on the totem pole.
And so let's talk about the seating a little. In September 2017, you brought us a plan. You talked about built-in seating. You called it out in your narrative. It showed no banquette seating on the patio, and it showed little teeny corner banquettes in the restaurant. So that went on, and I'm assuming between then and August 2018, when you brought back a plan that showed all the banquette seating, not called out, but it was on your plan. So you worked with staff in that time to tell them you were adding banquette seating?
Yeah,
Everywhere?
it was on the plan for the use permit at that point.
Okay.
And it's a part of the agreement of however many people are seated out there, we're complying with the seating code that we've, been holding to with the use permit.
Okay.
So that's why there are only 2 tables out on the front patio at this point.
And what are you doing to control? Because I've been in your restaurant several times, as I say, I really like it. Several times I've seen 4 tops with 6 people crammed in the banquettes. What are you doing about that?
We're not allowing seating beyond the allowed number of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that.
Our reservation system doesn't allow you to, so you might see more people at one table, but then you also see empty tables nearby. So it
Okay.
doesn't actually allow you to book beyond that.
Great, thank you for that. On the trellises, could you live with a condition of approval that the curtains not be untied and unfurled to their
Definitely.
34-foot width?
We don't want them messed with. It's part of our aesthetic. It's the same thing for the awnings themselves. Technically, they're operable if, in the event of a storm or in the winter or something, they're not being used. So the drapes the actual fabric awnings can be tied back in the event of inclement weather, but we don't have arms or anything out there for a reason. We want everything to remain exactly as intended.
Okay, and on the fireplace, do you remember about when you had the discussions with staff about the stop work order?
In August, I think. I'd have to look. It was sometime late summer.
So this past 4
This year,
months, probably?
Yeah. Yeah, probably sometime around Labor Day, I believe.
And could you said in your remarks that this is your final iteration. Could you live with a condition of approval that says you will not bring us any other design changes for 1 year? Because frankly, a lot has fallen through the cracks on this.
I would love to live with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably a perfectly fine approval of condition for no more design changes.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Other questions of the applicant? You're good. Thank you, at least for now. Any members of the public want to ask questions or comment? Now would be the time. Yes?
Kimberly Cook, resident of Yountville. Forgive me, I've been crossing things out as things were already covered, so this is a little jumbled. I'm hesitant to speak tonight, but I feel both as a resident and a member of ZDRB that I should. I'll start by saying it's a beautiful complex. It's a wonderful addition to town. It brings a long-awaited vibrancy to the north end of Yountville. But I believe that the process of asking for forgiveness instead of permission seems disingenuous. Regarding the height of the wall in front of RH Cafe, I don't care if they didn't know it. It is our code that it's 36 inches. And on the sidewalk side, why did they install one that when finished starts at 41 and climbs to over 5 feet tall? It's just not paying attention to our code. They could have built a 12-inch wall with a 12-inch planter with a 12-inch plant and complied, but they didn't. The elevations that were presented tonight, including that one there, isn't accurate of what is there. The elevations show about a 6-inch rise in slope, when actually there's a 20-inch rise in slope. So you look at the drawings, that looks good, but that's not how it really is. So that's how they end up with 5 feet. It convinces you that it looks like a low wall, but it's not. The wall in front of Masonry is the same thing. It starts at 41 and goes to 48. It's not as dramatic, but still every part of it is over height. When does 36 mean 36? When does it mean 41? When does it mean 61? I don't understand. Yes, there are difficulties building a wall on a slope, but that should mean that the average height meets the requirement at minimum, not that none of it meets the height. And what is the rush to approve this? Why didn't it go to ZDRB first, since the front walls are an exception to our code? I don't feel that the council should feel obligated to lessen the hardship on the applicant because it's already completed or they're in a hurry. I believe that approving this would put ZDRB in a difficult position by allowing and enabling rules creep and allowing the process and the code to be circumvented by going around ZDRB's opinion and putting another precedent-setting item out there that we can't defend. This approach of forgiveness instead of permission creates unnecessary conflict for everyone, and it's never going to benefit the applicant, the town, or our code. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment? Yes. And thank you for voting.
You're welcome. Doylene Marchbanks. I live in Washington Park. I agree that RH is a beautiful property. I was over there Sunday. It's just gorgeous. I'm sensitive to the height problem that's going on. I'm not used to speaking in public, sorry. 5 years ago, I hired Jack Chandler to put my backyard landscaping in. And he proceeded to put in a water feature for me and a stone surround and also some other pillars on the other end of the property. And I was told that they exceeded the height requirement, the codes, ordinance, whatever it was 5 years ago, and that it had to come down. And no one told me that I could leave it as it is. It's already built. Go down to the town council and ask for forgiveness. So, you know, I believe in consistency. So I just would like you to keep that in mind. I had to have all of the stone cut down on my property. So, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Stephen Miller, member of the ZDRB and resident of the historic district of North Yountville. I'm going to endorse a couple of the elements. I think that the fireplace on the ZDRB, we voted to approve that, and I think that it is important that the access between the two fireplaces is consistent, and I like the way it looks. I think it's really beautiful. I think that the drape issue is a non-issue. I think that it doesn't allow for it to be closed, and it does soften that condition there. And I am going to commend the designers for RH on their acceptance of the recommendations of the ZDRB to change the wall. And one of the things that I was concerned about with, I'm sorry, not the wall, the gate at the front of the south end of the garden. One of the things that I was concerned about was that it felt to me like a harsh, hard condition meeting another paved condition. And when I was over there the other night, I noticed that they had filled in a secondary sidewalk that I was questioning with an area of hedges that makes a green planting area on both sides of that gate and the fence. And it really will hide the proposed 3-foot gate and fence there. And I think that they responded very well to the recommendations of the ZDRB with regards to that. I'm going to leave the issue of that front wall alone, but I will say that I do think that it's important that people either adhere to the code or that they ask for a variance before they build it and not after.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, last chance. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and invite discussion by the council as we deliberate. Would any council member like to begin those deliberations? I know Councilmember Durham hates it if I call him. Councilmember Durham, please.
Call on me. Call on me. First of all, I find that the trellis drapes and the signage are acceptable. I'm going to make one comment on the signage, though, and I have the dubious distinction of being on the ZDRB and the town council through this whole process as well. And when I was on the ZDRB, we specifically got pictures of parking signs that are not what are there now. So even though that's the case here, the signage will still be fine. You know, I went back to 2015, I went back to 2017, and I look at the elevations here that were presented in this presentation, and it's all very confusing. So it's just interesting to me that we've never, I believe, have a clear picture, whether I was on the ZDRB or the council, of what our final product was going to be. And I must admit, it's nice to see 2 of you here tonight, not the usual 12. So it is nice to be able to deal with that. So let me start with the fireplace. In your narrative, it says that it's inconsistent and disproportionate condition. And I went everywhere to try to find that in the exceptions, and that's not a definition for an exception. And I also find it nice that the neighbors wrote a letter, but this is a gas fireplace that emits nothing, that will have no effect on the neighbors whatsoever, except for the massing. And once again, being on the ZDRB and on the town council, I questioned when I said it was okay to have an 18-foot fireplace on the RH side, and I couldn't find it anywhere. It's not to say it didn't happen, I just personally couldn't find it. So because that was allowed, this needs to be equal to that. I don't think that's the case at all, and I don't see that as being a valid exception. I thought it was interesting. I was there eating lunch on Sunday and walked the campus quite a bit, and from every point along that walkway, you can barely see the fireplaces either switching your head very fast or going back and forth or anything. And now I will know it's shorter, but 98% of the population will not know it's shorter. Fortunately, for the designers, they're going to cringe every time they walk on property, but I just don't see that as a justification for an exception to this fireplace. The fence gate, I think the gate on the north side is gorgeous, and it's 7 feet tall. I don't see why there couldn't be that consistency on the property. But if everybody agrees it should be 3 feet, that's fine. But if the purpose is for security, there are things outside. Someone could break into the back of RH Vault, Wine Vault. Then I see no issue with what they've done with the gate and the fact that it is located back off the walkway for it to be taller. But I'm fine with it being 3 feet, if that's what everybody agrees to. Then there's the knee walls and the screen hedges. It is interesting when I went over to Jessup and looked at Jessup and then turned across the street to see, and I'm going to make a snarky remark here, but I know RH loves gray, but there is so much gray in the front with that concrete. It's amazing when you're standing across the street and looking at it as a design element. And it's interesting because Jessup had to do it. Ad hoc had to do it. Now I'm asked to allow for an exemption at this business. What do I say to Jessup tomorrow when they email me and say, I don't understand, I have a 3 feet fence? Write out to me why I should allow this, why you allowed this exemption, and I can come back to the council and have it for myself. And I understand the slopes and all those things as described, but I don't know why, if the hedges were so important, why the concrete wasn't made shorter and then put the hedges on top. I mean, I'm not a designer, but I can actually figure that one out. And I'm going to be snarky once again. You have a strict regimen for the plants. Your restaurant manager sat here not 3 months ago when I point blank asked him how that parking management plan was going to work out with the schedule, and 3 months later we see how well that worked out. And that's been difficult to swallow as well, because I voted on it and I agreed to it, and it hasn't been strict at all. So that's difficult to see as well. So on the screen hedges and the knee walls, I cannot find a reason to grant an exception. So I believe I've hit everything.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
Thank you, Mayor. I will first start just by saying that I think it's a wonderful property. I can't even get in there. You have to, like I heard from my neighbor, call 2 weeks in advance. So I haven't had the perfect egg yet, similar to another council member, but I'm looking forward to that. I never thought of that. It really is something very special to Yountville. There's, any of my follow-on comments really takes nothing away from that. So I do thank RH for coming and what they've put in. It's really quite spectacular. So next I'll just go in order as our planning director had talked about. The fireplace, I think is certainly on us. I will validate what the planning director told me, although I can't find it, that the original one on the RH site was approved at 18 feet. That is on us. However, the one on the masonry site, that is not on us. It was, I was, actually quite shocked to learn that there was a stop work order. Boy, those red flags are quite serious. And then to say that you're going to continue at your own risk, well, I can't really understand that at all. I'm just sorry, maybe I'm too analytical. I cannot at all agree that this axis line of symmetry concept, it's, you look at one, stand at one fireplace and look to the other one, it's actually definitely a concept. It's not really a visual to me. So I cannot accept and approve that the fireplace at masonry is acceptable at that height. And there's no functional need for it either. There's no smoke, so you just need a little venting. It can be actually quite short, but it can fit into our standard code. The planters, the same thing. It's, when someone stand up in front of me and say they're unaware of the code, hey, I've tried that on policemen when I was speeding, and it did not work. That's just, and it's not going to work for me. I definitely think that this needs to be 36 inches, and you've got some experts to figure out how you deal with that slope. That is just, unfortunately, not my problem, and I can't approve that either. The drapes, I think those seem to be fine. I did read in the resolution, it says the trellis drapes shall be, that means you cannot do anything else, maintained as fixed panels. So I think that addresses them closing. If somebody has any better words than that, that seems pretty, thou shall only do this, so I'm fine with that. The fence, I was also, when I looked at it, I was very confused about which side we were even talking about, and I had first focused on the middle, but on the sides, because I thought that was already going to be 7 feet tall. I was very concerned about the security and making sure you have a very unique site, so I was willing to allow for a higher fence for extra security, but now I have a better understanding, so I'm fine with 3. Signage, I am fine with the signage, so I have no comments there.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you for coming in. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful site. And it's unfortunate that had these steps all been taken prior to making the changes, we wouldn't be sitting here giving you a ration. But nonetheless, I agree with my council members that when we have required other businesses in town to follow the rules, it's very hard to make an exception for one, and the newest one. So I agree that, and I understand your symmetry, but I don't think I think the perspective of looking from one fireplace to the other isn't going to be diminished if they are not quite the same size. So I also support no on the 18-foot fireplace. On the knee walls, I think that you should be able to figure out how to make them 3 feet tall, including the green. I'm glad you want to add the box, the hedge. But I think that, altogether it should be 3, and it should be 3 consistently all the way down the property. Somehow you could, design that. The drapes, I think they're fine. They're beautiful, and you're not going to be closing them, so I don't have a problem with that. And the 3-foot metal fence in front is fine, and the signage is fine. That's what I find.
Thanks. Sandra, I'm going to ask you if you could put our aerial shot back up there.
Yes. Oh, so could you help me, Michelle?
And while you're looking for that, I can, okay.
This one.
The one back, the actual rendering that shows the whole, there you go. Nope.
Oh, sorry,
That
site
one.
plan. Got it.
Yes, okay. Because I wanted just to see explicitly the sight lines as it relates to the fireplaces. I know when I walked the site, and I get it, I mean, I'm a symmetry person. This is the most symmetrical thing I've ever experienced, in a lot of very good ways. I'm not saying that to be demeaning at all. There was great pain to achieve this. I'm sure you've lived it, and we've all lived it for years now. And there are some of the things I can very easily tick off as I'm fine with. The gate and fence, to be perfectly honest, we don't have fences for security in Yountville. We don't. We have them for aesthetics for the most part, maybe some control of certain areas, ABC licenses that require it, that type of thing. I have no problem with the way you've proposed the fence. I think the lower fence actually is beneficial because you see the beauty of the, I'll call it garden, especially with the metal structures that are back there. You have a 7-foot metal fence. Upon metal, it starts to get a little bit, dare I say, heavy metal? I'll say heavy metal. I will. Noting as we had the discussion about the gas burning, I was less concerned about the height of the Burgundy Commons units. Seeing them in some of the iterations, looks like it's about the same height as some of those roof peaks, but the smoke issue is not an issue. I did want to just quickly mention we did receive, and I failed to mention during the public hearing, emails from Nancy Kasky and Esther Lamb and Chris Parks that were both emails in support of the applications as submitted. So I just wanted to recognize those in addition to the ones that were already referenced that were in the staff report. So the signs I'm okay with. Again, I get the symmetry. I get them located where they are. I think people are still having a little bit of trouble finding the parking lot entrance with that driveway. We knew that was going to be a little bit tricky because it's a one-way in and then find your way out the back. It's a little unconventional, but it doesn't pose a problem. So the gate and fence I'm fine with. The signage I'm fine with. Normally I would really have an issue with going 8.5 feet over on the chimney because that's not even close. And I get the symmetry thing, but if you want to get into perspective, if you're standing in the middle and you're looking up the slope and down the slope, 2 18-foot 10 inches, they don't look the same either, frankly. If you're in front of it and you hit the same height on a mantle, then you walk to the other one and you say, okay, they're the same height. That's why I'm okay with it. It doesn't sound like my colleagues are okay with it, but it is set back far enough from the street. We did this on the Bardessono Hotel site. We allowed the 2-story tower that has the elevator that goes up to the second floor swimming pool area to exceed by a couple feet because it was set back some 200 feet from where you could see it on the public right away. And now it's virtually invisible because we're all used to it. I have no problem with the height of the chimney other than the fact that you didn't ask for permission. I have a problem with that. Whether it was lost in all the iterations and we failed to catch it, or I don't think anyone was trying to pull a fast one either, but there were so many moving parts to this over 4 years, inevitable that something was going to be overlooked. I can forgive the chimney, not the way it got there, but I don't feel it's intrusive to the point of having to knock off 8 feet, because then it does change the symmetry of it to take off that much. So I would be okay with the chimney. Then we get to, I think I've already said the drapes are fine. I just want to make sure there couldn't be a massing issue. Councilmember Mueller cited the language that says, no, you can't close them. You've said you don't want to close them. I get that. So it all comes back down to the one most challenging issue is the walls and the boxwood planters. We have had residents that we've held accountable to our ordinances. That might be a different set of circumstances in a residential area as it is a commercial. Sometimes we have allowed exceptions to our ordinances. We have walls that are taller than they have to be normally because of the headlights of cars, that we're protecting the neighbors on the other side. We've said you've got to build a higher wall. That's not on the street frontage. Typically, we have been very strict about keeping the street frontages to the heights that you've heard about tonight. We very recently held another business accountable that's on Washington Street that had no wall. They just built living hedges or a hedge that was twice the size, and we said you can't do that, and they had to take it out and or cut them down to match. We are all about I remember when I was thinking about having that front cafe, it was all about the vibrancy and the energy that type of outdoor dining brings to the streetscape. And now it's virtually all gone, at least on the southern half, if not both parts of it, because of the slope and the height of that. Again, I get the symmetry thing. It is not our obligation, though, to make sure that your outdoor seating matches to the inch what your indoor seating experience is. I get that that's your program, and the company believes in all of that. But we've also said all along for 4 years that this is not the normal RH location. This is not a 6-story former bank building. This is not a former, retail building that's in a major city. and that we would need you to comply to the proper proportions here. All the way up to Mr. Friedman, that was promised and committed to us. That's the one element that I can't forgive is the front walls. Even though years and years ago we talked about Frankie, Johnny, and Luigi too, and the other iterations. If we had moved forward within 2 years, there might even have been some grandfathered condition that you could have taken advantage of, that those were non-compliant, existing conditions. This is 4 years later, so all the entitlements that were on that property are long gone. So I'm going to hold you accountable to what the conditions are now. If we were talking about a few inches, I get it. The slope causes, it's hard to have it level from the inside of the campus. So if it's 1.5 feet up here, so it's 3 feet down here, or whatever the numbers play out, I would forgive some of that space, but going all the way up to over 5 feet is really challenging for me. I do appreciate that they're broken up, and that's why I'm still very much on the edge of whether I could find the necessary condition. It's a pretty severely sloped piece of property, but that's not new to you, not new to us. I would hope that we could move forward with all 4 of the other elements, but it sounds like we're universally resistant to the condition of the walls and the hedge in front. I'm not sure what the answer is there. I don't want to eliminate the walls. I think taking away the boxwood plants leaves a lot of hardscape there, and it doesn't give the aesthetic that you want for either the outside appearance or the experience of your guest inside. But I think I'm getting the sense that we're going to be telling you that's not okay the way they are, and it's going to be up to you to figure out a solution that's going to be a more reasonable compromise. And I would be willing to compromise something over those 3 feet, but not to the degree it is currently. So those are my thoughts. I know it could be a little bit tricky if we're looking to take any action tonight on, like I said, I would support 4 of the 5 things you're requesting. If there's a motion to that effect, that's fine. If not, then we'll talk more about it. Yes, Councilmember Dorman.
Thank you.
I forgot I
you.
didn't start with you this time. I always start with you.
I dodged the bullet not starting. So it did. So thank you. I pretty much agree with what everyone's saying. On the fireplace, I'm optional. I could go 18 feet. I can go 10 feet. The draperies, I'm okay as long as it is clear what we mean in the resolution, that they are not to be unfurled, to be sticking out 34 inches. The masonry fence, I'm okay with that, and the gate. The signs, I'm okay with. The knee walls, I am a strong no on. I find no necessity, and I find that you built at your own peril outside of our ordinances. I would ask that any motion include a 1-year no change except for the knee walls, because I think that will have to come back to be vetted. I would also want some timeline on maybe not the time you come back, maybe not the time the applicant comes back with the knee walls redone, but I would like for the planters, anything that exceeds 36 inches to come down within the next 10 calendar days, whether it's masonry or RH. And I have talked to our planning director about that, and she thinks that is doable. So I'm not just making that part up. But so those are my comments.
Thank you. I would just respond quickly to your last couple statements. I would not be interested in supporting putting a 1-year moratorium on any changes. I don't know that we've ever done that with anyone. I think it's going to be quite clear to the applicant that we've kind of run out of patience for multiple changes. I don't think we're at the stage that we have just gone through over 4 years, where you've made significant changes to the aesthetic, to the design, et cetera, it's all built now. So now you use the term tweaking, I think. And I think that anything that would be changed going forward would be minor because there's so little left. This is kind of the last of the larger items, I think. I also would be very careful about a 10-day, 2-week requirement to remove purely because of the time of year we're in. And what I would hate to see is we add a construction element right as we are about to open Holidays in Yountville and have the street frontage be our kind of marquee. I agree in concept, but not with the number. I think that we need to agree with by X date, something needs to be modified to comply. But just trying to be very candid and realistic. We're going to be out of November before we know it, and then only half of December gets anything done, and we're into January. But I think by sometime early in 2019, if we feel that this change needs to happen, that would be appropriate. It also allows to get through the holiday season and a slower time of year so that it's less, not that it's necessarily convenient for the applicant, but it's less intrusive on our streetscape and kind of quality of life. So that my comments to yours, but other,
Well,
Councilmember Moeller?
I have some comments. I'm willing to probably not tonight put a moratorium on because I think we've got to get based on the motion I plan on making, the planners have to come back. After that, when they come back, if there are other things, I am not going to eliminate that as a possibility, but probably for tonight, I'm not going to request that. So I'm going to make a motion. I might need to get some comments.
Before you make a motion, I want to make sure we all have a chance to continue deliberation, but Gary?
Yeah, I just want to add one suggestion for the council this evening. Because the resolution before you tonight is essentially approving and finding in favor of all the findings, in order to make a motion and to understand why these findings are not being made, it might be helpful if staff could redraft a resolution and bring it back at a future meeting. This evening you've held the public hearing, the zoning code requires that, but as to the particular findings and why they're not met in this particular case, I think it would be helpful for the record if we could bring back a future resolution suggestion.
Okay, so I have a question.
Councilmember Mueller.
So would we deny this or would we not do anything with this resolution? How would we deal with this resolution tonight if we decide to take that approach?
So this resolution is, I don't think satisfies the council's direction this evening because it grants everything. And so this would give staff chance to take the council's direction, find why these particular findings are not met, and come back with a future resolution. So this evening it wouldn't require a vote. The public hearing is now closed, and this matter would be brought back as a consent or not at the council's pleasure at a future meeting.
But we would be continuing the item, not voting either way on it.
Correct.
And to a date certain, I think, to be fair to the applicant as well as our staff, but we do have the first week of December meeting possible, or
I think the 20th of this month.
do you have time to work that out for, I mean, that basically means you have a week to modify the findings or add
Well,
the
I
findings.
won't be here on the 20th.
So,
I mean, the rest of the team would. Steve would be here.
but in
And I
terms of
could
you being able to
probably
put
getting
the
staff
contents of
report
a staff report
Yes.
together so they can be presented, so that
I can
seems
do
like
that
a
by the
reasonable
20th.
enough time?
Mhm.
Okay, so that is an option. But is there any further discussion by the council tonight? Yeah, Councilmember Dorman.
Thank you. So, taking town attorney's advice and continuing it and giving some further direction, I am fine to take out the moratorium, and I am fine to go to something like February 15th if we want to talk about putting a date in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really think we really need a rush. So the signs are not up, correct? That's what I thought. So they're already up. The fireplace is already up. That's going to have to be dealt with. The drapes are already there. So I'm just not understanding. I'm fine with putting it off until next year because, you know, if they do have to take that fireplace down, there needs to be some planning for that. And there needs to be some planning for the planners. So am I missing something about the rush to do this? I understand we want to get it done, but
Well, what I'm hearing, and I'll suggest that we continue the item as is to the November 20th meeting. At that time, with Sandra being able to evaluate findings and incorporating what you've heard from the council tonight, we can then discuss and make a determination through a motion if
Okay.
any deadline still needs to be
Okay,
proposed.
that
Is
works.
that fair?
That works.
Gary, I always like it when you nod your head yes. That's always
Agreed.
a better sign. Okay, so is
Ma-
there?
Mayor, can I ask one clarification for my
Yes.
notes and my records? Councilmember Durham, in terms of the fireplace, were you at Masonry, were you in support or not in support of it staying at its current height?
I am not in support of the exception.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
And we'll have a chance to continue discussing that. So is there a motion to continue the item to November 20th, regular scheduled
I'll
meeting?
make that motion as soon as let me get back to my buttons.
Get ready. Here we go.
I'll make a motion that we continue this item per our discussion until November the 19th meeting.
Hold on just a sec. November 20th, yeah.
November 20th.
I'm just
Thank you.
looking to Eddie to see if, are you,
And I hit the motion button, Michelle, but it did not do anything.
And
I believe Councilmember Dorman was the seconder.
Okay. Here we go.
Councilmember Moeller is trying to make the motion.
Refresh it?
Okay, let's do a voice vote and we'll figure it out. So the motion is to continue the item to November 20. I believe we had a motion by Councilmember Moeller, second by Councilmember Dorman. Voice vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we're going to continue this item to the 20th. I would just offer a suggestion that if you're able to come back on the 20th, actually, we can't deliberate with you anymore. We've closed the public hearing. So if you're able to work with staff on the information you've heard from us tonight to bring some ideas that we might be able to deliberate on. Can we add additional information or not, actually, Gary?
Yeah, so the public hearing, in terms of what the record is closed as of this evening, but as with any Brown Act meeting, they would be able to have public comment, but it wouldn't necessarily be part of the record. I know that's a weird distinction to make. But
So would the applicant be able to work with staff to maybe find a solution that could be presented on the 20th, or can we not consider that?
if that was something that staff and the council wanted to do, we could always renotice a public hearing and reopen it, essentially.
So I would suggest that we do re-notice the public hearing, so we allow the applicant, if you're able to come with an alternative solution for consideration. We haven't taken a vote for sure, one way or the other, but you've heard where the council stands right now. You're not obligated to bring solutions in 2 weeks. I get it, that it might be very challenging, but I'm just offering that as a possibility to work with staff and see if there's something that can be worked out before we do take action on the 20th. So I believe
So I would just clarify that if it is going to be noticed, the notice would be posted by Friday, November 9th to meet the 20th requirements.
Okay, let's plan on doing that. I would not want us to not be able to consider new information if it's brought forward the next 2 weeks. So to be flexible, we'll just notice the public hearing again. Okay, thank you everybody for that discussion. We're going to move on to our other item that is a public hearing also, introduction and potential waiving of the first reading of ordinance as listed here on item 8B. Can we start with the staff report, please?
Yes, Mayor and council members, I believe this will be brief. This is an ordinance to amend the zoning code, specifically section 17.156.030 regarding use permits. Currently, the municipal code says that a change in any authorization or a condition of use is subject to the same procedures as the previous use permit, meaning that once the council approves a use permit with certain conditions, the process for modifying those conditions is to restart the use permit process, and it doesn't provide any other information on the procedure for doing so, time limits for doing so, and the like. The ordinance before you tonight would state that any authorization for a change in a condition that's been imposed in a use permit may only be brought after the initial 6-month review period for that use permit. And then once that has been brought, only once in a 12-month period. It does create an exception, though. As you probably know, a violation of a condition of a use permit is actually a misdemeanor under the municipal code, and it is possible, or at least conceivable, that an applicant wouldn't be able to conceive with a condition, or comply with a condition, and so that might constitute a taking or otherwise infringe on their constitutional rights for land use. So to address that, this allows a procedure where an applicant could, in writing, demonstrate to the town attorney that it violates the Constitution either as a taking or otherwise, and then town attorney would issue a written decision after that granting or denying the exception. That being said, the time periods for review and how often those applications can be made are up to the council. This is just a draft ordinance, and it can be modified tonight during this hearing should the council wish to do so, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Mueller, question?
All right, it has to do with, what we're talking about here is specifically the use permit. So, for an example, if somebody came and they had design changes, would this apply?
I do not believe it would, no.
Okay, that's my question.
Any other questions? Councilmember Dorman.
Thank you. Is there a way that we can charge the applicant all or part of your time to prepare your written decision? Because that could run into quite a bit of research.
That is actually already in the master fee schedule. It currently charges the full cost of an application for a use permit. There's a $500 deposit, and then as the process moves along, depending on how complex it is, that is updated and bills are sent. So my time is actually already included.
Excellent.
In previous use permits that's happened.
Okay, and what, if use permit changes are filed before the effective date, how are they handled? Let's say we pass on first reading tonight, second reading next time, in the window.
Yeah, so I guess this would take effect on December 20th. So if an application were submitted before December 20th, assuming that the council approves this evening and does a second reading at the next meeting, if there was an application during that period of time, this would not apply. So just the procedure that's in the code would apply.
And final question, which you and I talked about offline, is can we put in there that the attorney will report to the town council? I know that you will, and I know that most attorneys will, but I think it would be good if we had that safety net. Just some sort of.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Does that change the content of this and not allow us to take the?
No, the ordinance can be modified tonight, and I think it's simply adding to the end of subsection C and report such to the town council.
Any other questions for Councilmember Mueller?
I have one more. Is this being recommended for our approval or denial tonight because it's good practice, or are we trying to solve a problem?
So this was staff originated, and I was asked to draft this ordinance. It is common in zoning codes to have restrictions on use permits, particularly if a use permit has been denied or if a particular condition has been denied, to not allow a reapplication for those particular uses or conditions for a period of time. That is common. Having a restriction like this is a little less common, but there's no reason why the town couldn't do so.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I'll open the public hearing and invite any member of the public that'd like to speak on this item to come forward now. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and continue deliberation or action by the council.
I'm willing to make a motion if you're looking for one.
Yes.
You're looking
Try
for
this
one.
again.
All right. Okay, let's go back out. And now it says withdraw motion, we go out again. Okay, sorry, just trying to, I can't get to the part that looks like the little, I'm refreshing, but it's,
If you go out to the main agenda,
I tried that and it didn't seem to be there.
go one more level.
Okay. It just says, oh, now it just switched. Did somebody do something back there? It said withdraw motion from last. Okay, I'm making a motion to move that we approve,
Introduce and waive.
introduce and waive ordinance number 18-478, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville, amending section 17.156.030 of chapter 17.156 of title 17 of the Yountville Municipal Code regarding use permits, and I'll
As
waive
with the,
first
with the
reading.
addition.
Of, what did I miss?
And under
Report out,
subsection
that
C.
the attorney will report out to the council upon making a decision,
Agreed.
Thank you.
or similar language to that effect. Okay, there's a motion and a second, it looks like.
Second.
And we'll see if we get a screen.
Okay, did you get anything on your?
No, let me go
Okay,
back
we're gonna
out
hit
again.
start voting.
there it
If
is.
you hit refresh, it showed up.
I didn't hit refresh and it showed up.
Okay, so please vote. And it
Everyone's there?
looks like that passed unanimously. Thank you. That worked. Okay, let's move quickly ahead to administrative item, Wi-Fi hotspot ad hoc committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Pretty simple thing for us this evening. We're looking for 2 members of the council to participate in an ad hoc committee. As you are well aware, we have had a Wi-Fi hotspot project on the CIP budget for a couple of years. We have gotten it down to a couple of candidates that we think will help us build the network that we need to provide Wi-Fi from one end of town to the other, and in a couple of neighborhoods out to some parks. So it will benefit both visitors and residents here in town. Again, most of the visitors and residents who visit or live kind of have an expectation of Wi-Fi. This will help fulfill that expectation. In addition, the TID here in Yountville has expressed interest in also participating in helping us to evaluate the appropriate solution. So this evening, with your help, we will have 2 members of the council to help us get this process going, and then come back to you all with some recommendations.
Okay, any questions? Any comment from the public? Okay, so are there volunteers to be on this ad hoc?
I'm very
No?
happy
Sorry, Michelle.
to help.
I
Hold on.
think we need to be clear if there's a consensus of council to proceed with this project, and then if there is, then to appoint the 2 council ad
I
hoc.
figured if nobody volunteered, that would be the consensus that we did not want to proceed.
Clear.
2 out of
I'm
5.
just wanting to be clear.
So if people volunteer, then, let's say, does the council agree that this is something that we want to do?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I think I was starting to hear Councilmember Mueller be a volunteer, is that correct?
You were. And I'd also like to recommend Councilmember Durham.
Is there, before someone's being told to do it, is there anyone else that wants to do it?
No, I'd like to do it. if-
Okay, there you go.
So I'd like to do it.
So does somebody have a motion to appoint said council members to said committee? Looks like somebody's trying to
I'm
push a button.
trying.
It's pushed.
So I move to appoint council members Moeller and Durham to the ad hoc Community Wi-Fi Hotspot Review Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, I'm still not seeing it.
Hit record, please. Hit record, please.
Okay, please vote. All in favor?
All in favor?
Or opposed, or abstaining? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to staff informational reports, PG&E decorative LED streetlight replacement. Is this you, Eddie?
It is me.
Changing seats?
Changing seats.
All right.
And quick. Well, give me 1 second. Michelle, can you put the
I can.
presentation?
Thank you.
Thank you. So good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Tonight, I bring you an informational report regarding the PG&E owned and operated decorative streetlights replacement upgrade, which follows the original PG&E program that replaced the Cobra headlights in Old Town. So right now in the town, we have approximately 46 decorative Cobra-style headlights that will be replaced with Salem-style LED lights. The GIS map that you see right now shows the lights up for replacement, and as you can see, they are mainly found in Toyon Terrace, Heritage, and Vista neighborhoods. The picture in this slide shows the new Salem-style decorative lights. These lights are LED based and are made for residential neighborhoods, provide energy-saving costs to the town, and also meet the sustainable requirements set by the town's climate action plan. In here, you can see a picture of the current Cobra-style lamps that are in town that will be replaced. As you can see, the lamps look very similar to the ones that will be replaced with. We anticipate that this will cost the town approximately $3,700 for the installation of these lights, which will be included with the current budget with no planned budget adjustments. The replacement of the street lights timing will be based on equipment delivery and contractor availability. The project will be managed by PAG entirely. And that's it for the report. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
I think the last sentence you just used is going to impact the equipment delivery and contract availability piece, that PG&E is going to be managing this entirely.
Basically.
Questions? Seeing no questions.
I
Vice
do
Mayor?
have one. Why is it that the town is paying for this instead of PG&E?
Joe, would you like to answer that?
They are going through the CPUC to try to get that resolved. If you remember, the Cobra Head Streetlight program that we had a similar condition applied, and they got the approval from CPUC this year to cover those costs. So there will be somewhat, the cost for this year will be somewhat offset by the rebate that we're getting from that project. They expect CPUC approval for this particular project to come up. And then we will get some rebate from that as well. So we're putting the money up front, and it'll go through CPUC, and then we will get the rebate coming up shortly, we hope.
Councilmember Mueller, question.
Yes, so will we eventually, I don't know when that is, have two different types of streetlights, this type and the, or the gooseneck one, or whatever you called that one
Salem
before?
style.
Cobra Head.
Cobra Head, thank you.
So the Cobra Heads are primarily in Old Town. Those have no plan to change. And the ones in the Toyon Terrace, Heritage, and Vista neighborhoods could potentially change if the town makes an offer to PG&E to purchase the system.
I would love to purchase it. They charge us a whole lot, but I heard they won't sell it to us. But
They
anyway,
will.
that's for another day.
Yep, correct. But for now, we are leaving it with them owning and operating the system.
So we'll have 3 different streetlights in town.
Correct. We'll have the town standard streetlights, the Cobra Head streetlights in Old Town, and the concrete pole with the kind of colonial head on it in the 3 neighborhoods that we described this evening.
Okay. No action on that. Informational. Thank you very much, Eddie and Joe. Council meeting reports and comments. Nothing to report from Flood Control and Water Conservation. NVTA, Councilmember Dorman, is there a report? Okay. Any other reports,
I'd like to make
Vice Mayor?
Yes, I would just like to report on our emergency preparedness workshop and thank the participants, Sergeant John Hallman, Sheriff John Robertson, and Battalion Chief Jason Martin, as well as Supervisor Dillon. It was there were 40 plus attendees. We introduced our rockin' new web page for preparedness. Big kudos to Eddie, and you did an outstanding job, and thank you. Carrie and I put him through a lot over that, but it was all worth it. And I created some forms for people. If they would like to have them, they can send me an email to the town. And so it's, forms for what you should take with you and forms for your family's communication plan and things like that. If you would like to have those, let me know. I could leave a stack here at the town hall for you also. But I want to thank my esteemed co-chair, Carrie Dorman. Councilmember Dorman and I worked since June to get this first one off the ground. But as I said at that meeting, as it wrapped up, it is not the last one. We have other things planned because preparedness is an ongoing effort.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you also to our great staff and everybody else who helped us get this up and going. Vice Mayor, could you just talk a little bit, just a moment or two, about our plans for the ongoing?
Okay. Well, what we are looking at trying to facilitate is the Yountville Neighbors Network, wherein neighbors participate at their own speed and put their own group together and get to know their neighbors and get to know what special needs there are in the neighborhoods or what special resources there are. We also want to include in that plan a network of radio operators. There are at least 20 people in the town of Yountville who have ham radio licenses, and we found out that those are very good to keep in touch. And also, we want to include the people who have CERT training, which is Community Emergency Response Training, that is offered by the police department and the fire department, and there will be one here in Yountville in April. So please consider signing up and taking the course. It's only 20 hours, and then you become like second responders. And the first responders really appreciate the people who are CERT trained. So all in all, these are the steps that as we go forward, we'll be meeting with other workshops to facilitate our Yountville Neighbor Network program. Is that what you were asking for? Thank you.
Thanks. I do have a few announcements here. I wanted to reiterate about the Faces of Freedom sculpture dedication this Sunday, November 11th, for Veterans Day at Yountville Veterans Memorial Park, kind of in the middle of the lawn area near the sand volleyball court. And we met the artist earlier tonight, so all are welcome to join. And also Monday, November 12th, the Veterans Day ceremony at the Veterans Home Armistice Chapel. Tomorrow is also, on behalf of our Chamber CEO, Whitney Diver McAvoy, announcing the Celebrity Chefs Luncheon that is tomorrow, serving 2 lunch services to our residents at the Veterans Home. We, as always, get many volunteers from the town, including our staff, so thanks in advance to all those that are volunteering to help tomorrow. Also, we have the town tree lighting and holiday movie coming up Sunday, November 18th, which is prior to our next meeting. The tree lighting about 5 o'clock and the movie starting at the Lincoln Theater around 7. 2 other announcements, and I think, Michelle, I'm going to ask that we put on a standing report from the League of California Cities, since I'm now the second vice president, on weekly calls and very regular event participation. On November 15th and 16th, I'll be in Santa Rosa at the California Economic Summit, representing us and the League. And there are 2 days of sessions there about our economy and some options on moving forward. Also, I'll be attending, starting tomorrow, the National League of Cities Conference in Los Angeles. I'll also be participating on Friday in a panel of mayors. They're calling a learning exchange panel, where we're hoping to talk about various issues that are not unique to individual jurisdictions, so that we can try to do a little exchange of information and best practices. So I'll be continuing to provide some updates. I know that we have several members of the council involved in the league, and as we have other things to report out, we will do that. So if we could just have a standing league presentation. Are there any other reports or comments? No. With that, the polls are closed. Hopefully everyone has voted. I thought we were going to get out of here before they did close, but it's 8:03, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to our next regular meeting of November 20th at 6 p.m.
So moved.
Okay, which button do you want to push there, Eddie? I think the vice mayor moved, and we won't do it for this. All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.